Lex, thanks for coming to the Founders Lounge.
Thank you for having me.
So, my understanding is you founded at least 5 companies, potentially more. I don't know. Maybe we're gonna find out today. You've been nominated for the Young Entrepreneur of the Year a while ago. You won the Dragon's Den investment a while ago. You raised millions of funding, uh, at least for your current business, maybe also prior to that. So, a lot of things that we can talk about. And I hope we're going to learn some things about all of those topics. But I was thinking I want to start this conversation a little bit differently today. And that's hopefully going to guide the rest of our conversation then as well, which is, so you started a few different companies. What do you think is your superpower or your zone of genius, if you want? Where do you thrive? What do you think, what are you best at?
Oh, great question. I think that the answer to that's probably evolved or changed over the years. As I've gotten older and perhaps more reflective and a little bit more self-aware, I think that the answer there will have been impacted by that. But if I'm trying to distill it down, I think it's really simple. I think it's curiosity, probably. It's it's looking at things and A, wondering how they work, B, wondering whether they can work better, whether they should work better. And then I think lastly, can I do anything about this? Do I feel strongly enough? Is this a big enough problem? Is it an exciting enough problem? Is it a solvable problem? Um, but it stems from curiosity. So I think looking at the world with that lens, um, you'll always have adventures, you'll always have fun, and I think that's probably a trait that most entrepreneurs share in at least some way.
Does that work for you both on the big picture? So, when you're maybe thinking about a new business or a new strategy or a big new idea to start within the company, and also day to day, or, when you just see like a small problem within the company, is that curiosity driving you there as well?
It's a great question. I mean, curiosity takes some effort, and yeah, as life gets busier, as there are more things to balance and to juggle, I think you need to save your curiosity bullets for things that maybe can yield some kind of a return for you. When you really want to dig deep into something. But I think it's for the most part, it's just part of your lens of looking at the world. You know, you put some food into cook, you look at the back of the packet because you're interested and curious about what's in it. You close the cupboard to the wardrobe and it sort of sticks a little bit and you start to investigate why it's sticking. You're either that kind of a person or you're not. I think you're either kind of in touch with your surroundings and curious about what's going on around you or not. But in terms of really investing time in diving deep into something, you think you need to use that energy sparingly because that's demanding.
And if I understand correctly, so for me, for you, it's more like you have to restrict yourself from not being curious about certain things that would be not productive, I suppose. It's not the other way
Yeah,
around. It's not like you need to force yourself to be curious about the important things, right?
exactly. Yeah, you put it beautifully. Yeah, the discipline is not going down every rabbit hole and chasing every shiny thing in the periphery, which is hard, right? Because there's so much stimulation out there. There's so much
Mm.
information. You could scroll through socials, read the news, have a look on LinkedIn, and within half an hour, your brain's just like, oh, there's 50 new ideas out here and things I need to look into and investigate and stay on top of and be the master of. And the reality is, if you chase everything, you'll end up with nothing.
I love it. We'll definitely going to talk more about ideas towards the end, but I wanna touch on some other topics first before we get to that. But I love talking about business ideas as well. And actually, this podcast started initially. It was just all about business ideas. It was like me and my co-host, my business partner. We were just talking about business ideas. Like, well, there's this opportunity and there's that opportunity. I think I'm fairly curious, but he is, I think, a prime example of that curiosity, where to the point where sometimes we would have a call with another person and he would be asking so many questions and such detailed questions that I feel uncomfortable sometimes. I'm like, okay, let the other person breathe a little bit. That's maybe too much.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, I think
But it works. It works for me.
listen. I think you have to. I think most people that, particularly people that change things, real kind of innovators, they have to understand the status quo in
Mhm,
detail.
mhm, mhm.
And I think it's pride probably gets the better of us when we actually don't quite understand something, and we don't ask. We're not curious because we don't want to be seen as, as not clued up, and that's a shame. People let that get in the way of acquiring the knowledge that they need to really understand something. So, hats off to your co-host for that.
Yeah, a great example of that, and just I think naturally incredibly curious. Mm,
Mm.
so when it comes to your businesses, the thing that you started in the past, I would love to talk about a few of them to get a bit of your history and the story where you're coming from. But I'm curious, throughout that journey, you were an entrepreneur, I think, from this beginning, right? From straight out of uni, probably, full time, just starting your own companies, running that. um, what were some of the most memorable moments throughout those years?
Gosh.
Asking the deep questions here.
Yeah, no, it's gosh, forcing me to be reflective. I mean, so many moments. It's really difficult to pick out those that are stronger or more important or more meaningful. I mean, I would probably describe myself. It's a bit sickly. Like, first of all, let's be clear. Like, describing yourself as an entrepreneur, it's a bit awkward, right? First of all, it's a French word, and in the English tongue, entrepreneur, to pronounce anything foreign is awkward, and it's not a label that you kind of put on yourself. It's what other people probably call you. There's no association with the level of success. I could be an entrepreneur and be a billionaire. I could be an entrepreneur living at my parents' house, losing £10,000 a week of my savings. Right? There's no
Mm.
gauge. There's no inference in the word. Um, but I was the classic lemonade stall entrepreneur. I was the guy at school, largely because I think I wanted to find my role and fit in and be popular. I'd always placed um, probably excess value on being popular. So I wanted to be the guy that people would come to, whether it was for penny sweets or for pages, which will give away my age, or B grade electronics. And so I was buying things and selling them through secondhand papers and at school from the age of about 11. Partly because I'd come from a state school and a fairly kind of working, like aspirational working middle class background. It was just me and my mum because my dad passed away when I was 8 or 9, and she started her own business. That was incredibly inspirational. But went to this school because the government at that point in time were giving away, were issuing bursaries and state scholarships and helping people go to good schools. They don't do that in the same way now. But I went to this really good school where there was a lot of wealthy people and wealthy families, and it was my first exposure really to kind of wealth and what could be done. And I was like, oh, I want to start trading. I want to start making some money. I want my mum to be driving me to school in this car or that car or whatever it might be. So that's how I started, and then it was about organising nightclub events and wanting to start a record label and just have people around you. It's all kind of part of this wanting to be popular or be in the middle of the social circle, and then that kind of carried on through university events and various other bits. Investing in property, was working as an estate agent, got into property, um, and then really kind of upon leaving university, yeah, just scores of ideas. I mean, scores and scores of ideas. The first was really through chance. It was through an opportunity to go to China with a good friend of mine, whose one of their family businesses was importing goods from China and selling them at auction houses. Things like gilt-framed mirrors and affordable decorations for the home and affordable furniture and things like that. So we went out to Guangzhou at the age of 21. And I was only supposed to go really as a guest, as an observer, but got carried away. I'd made some money already in property because of just timing. No great design, but I bought property when you could buy property with a 99% mortgage, no questions asked, no credit checks. Put £2,000 of a student loan down, and you can buy yourself 2 student properties, which pretty much doubled in value over the 3-year period that I was at university. So it was good timing and a decent sprinkling of luck. Anyway, I find myself in China and I'm thinking, well, there's picnic hampers over there that are being sold at the equivalent of £10. I've seen picnic hampers in petrol stations back home for £30, £40. There's some bronze statues over there, which I know would retail for X back home, and you start to get very excited, and it's a lovely place to be. It's a very basic trade. You buy for X, you sell for Y, and you make your margin. So I ended up buying 3 or 4 containers worth of totally random um, bits and bobs, and set up a picnic hamper website. I still remember, called Shire Green Hampers, and various other things. And were principally selling via eBay. It was the main outlet, to such an extent that ended up evolving into, after watching the film The 40-Year-Old Virgin, where the protagonist has an eBay drop-off shop. I saw that movie, thought, great, this must be in the UK. It's not. I should be the one to do it. So I opened the first eBay drop-off shop in the UK, in Manchester, which is a shop where people can give you things to sell on eBay on their behalf, and you charge a commission for doing it. Lots of work, a really messy, sort of awkward business, actually. But that was my first kind of proper, I guess, grown up business. Took a lot of the money that I'd made from property into that. And I guess I've deviated from your question so much so that, it's more of a kind of the journey bit, but that
Which
would
is
be.
great, which I would have asked you about that anyway. So all right, before we continue, I want to take a second to talk about our sponsor. I've always been saying that one of the best ways to learn about business is by working closely with a smart and successful entrepreneur, and this might be your opportunity. Our sponsor is a company called Judge Me. Judge Me is a Shopify product review plugin, and they're the number one plugin on Shopify. They're literally, if you look at the Shopify App Store, they're in the first spot. They're bootstrapped, and they managed to outcompete other companies that raised hundreds of millions of dollars by just being smarter and building a better product. They were started by PJ, who was also a guest on the Founders Lounge, episode 54, so I recommend you to check it out. They recently moved their headquarters to London, and they're looking for smart people to join them. They're looking for product managers, engineers, and they're looking to fill other roles as well. So check out careers.judge.me and see if you find any role that you like and apply. So that's careers.judge.me. Now, enjoy the rest of the episode.
That's very kind. Well, I think that's a profound one for me, because it was my first proper big, I'm going to take on a lease. I took on a lease for a shop and a warehouse, and I was paying staff, and I was spending serious money, and I was getting quite a bit of PR attention. And yeah, that was, it was a big deal for me. As I mentioned, it was an awkward business. Lots of overhead, fixed overhead, requires immense scale to make it work. And you're dealing with 2 sets of customers as well: those who are selling via you and the people who are buying via you. So a lot of pain, and we grew that to a point where we were then acquired by a GE Capital backed company, auctioning for you. And I'll be honest with you, I was glad. I was ready to get out anyway. I couldn't see how we were going to turn it into something mega. I was working with some really good pals, which was lovely. We'd just, you go for beers after work, you talk about it in your social time, and I wouldn't say that it was playing at business, because we took it really seriously. But it was fun. It was really fun. We had lots of energy. We were all, single and ready to go for it. And it was a lot of fun. And I enjoyed building that, enjoyed the process of selling it. It wasn't a monster exit. It was enough to give me some time and some freedom and a bit of space. It was also a clean exit and immediate. exit
Uh-huh.
without any kind of vesting or earn out period. So yeah, I could leave straight away, which is good. I think as an entrepreneur, I've heard lots of stories of founders who have got an earn out period, and it's
Yeah.
hard. It's really
Yeah.
hard, that transition. So I was glad to get a clean and immediate exit. And then I did what most people would do, went off to just take stock for a little bit. And I went to Marrakesh for what was supposed to just be a week or so. And I do remember this quite clearly, and it's what a lot of people do when they're on holiday. It's mooch, mooch down the high street and look in the estate agents' windows. And just check out what the cost of living, what the cost of property is in this place. And you're like, holy cow, you can buy big properties here for like €100,000. And the King of Morocco had just allowed the low cost airlines to fly into Marrakesh. So it was this tidal wave of the kind of tourist interest flooding in. And I don't know if have you been to Marrakesh?
I've been, yeah, a few years ago. Yeah.
Yeah. So, like, especially if for Europeans or for Brits particularly, they say it's the nearest you can go to get the furthest away. And you've got 300 days of
Mm.
sun. You've got French inspired food, French language, which most people have got some level of familiarity with. So I was like, shit, this is going to be the next hotspot. So I bought an old riad, which is houses based around the central courtyard, and began the process of razing it to the ground and building a boutique hotel.
Mhm.
So and that was that was a year pretty much back and forth to Marrakesh, but a lot of time there dealing with just the most insane, like, property, like land ownership, um, and kind of cultural differences. Um, I've described it in the past as like one level above a venture. If you've got a venture here, doing business in North Africa at that time was like a quest. If you ever
Mhm.
played old school computer games like point and click,
Mhm.
take box to prop up with stick, tie string to stick, pull stick to trap mouse to put in the Vichy toise. I'm talking about Monkey Island for anyone who's old enough to know it. And that's what it was like doing business there. It was like, take this piece of paper to a hut in the desert to get a stamp from a notary, to go back to another hut in a different part of the desert to get a different stamp, to then go back into town to get a third, and repeat the process, and giving backhanders all the way through. So, like, it was fun, it was mental, and uh, and a bit like boot camp. It was really like, it felt like special forces boot camp. You had to be really resilient, and you had to just deal with constant delays and um, uncertainty. The sun and the color and the vibrancy and the exotic nature of that venture was yeah, that really helped to get over a lot of that frustration. But
Mhm.
yeah, and then, gosh, sold that in the end. We sold that to our next door neighbor, which is probably the best known riad. So that was a good example of um, location, location, location. We bought in a
Uh-huh.
really prime spot, which was the kind of the center of all the boutique hotels. And our neighbor, another hotel, wanted to expand its number of rooms. And so they made us a good offer, which was well timed again because tourism was dropping off a little bit at that point. The hype had died down, and reality was starting to settle in. So occupancy rates were less than people were expecting, and just basic provisions like with utilities and things that that you need to run a hotel well and reliably. The infrastructure wasn't quite there to hold it. So yeah, came back and settled back into life in London, and got involved in building a tech business, which was
Uh-huh.
had always been my passion. That curiosity that we talked about.
Yes.
That that was very evident with the arrival of computers. I remember so clearly as a kid. This is So I'm the generation where my first computer was an Amstrad CPC 464, black and green screen, cassette to load.
Hmm.
Then it went to sort of Atari, Amiga, that kind of, because floppy disk, have to load in 15 different floppy disks and things like that to load a game. But it was amazing. It was so evident that that these things were going to be the future, and I would just spend hours just tinkering, trying to improve the speed, or like trying to just go through the BIOS to change some settings to increase this or to increase that, or lusting after the latest release, like Windows 95, like, ooh, professional edition, ooh. And it was a bit like the Wild West in those days. You have these fairs where you could go and get bootleg games and bootleg software, and you'd have to call up phone lines to get cheat codes or hints on some of the more difficult games. And it was so, I just look back at it with such fondness and really romantic kind of era that I was lucky enough to be kind of an adolescent, well, a youth in an analog age, but at my adolescence, things started to get digital, but not to the point where it was too much, which it perhaps is now. But anyway, that was my kind of how I got into it. So tech had always been passion. I was taking computers apart, breaking them irreparably for the most part. But um, the web, like the arrival of the web, I was on BBS boards, which predates the web, like chat rooms and kind of bolt-ons to chat rooms and things. And then the web arrived, and I was like, wow, I love this. This is something else. Um, so it was natural and not surprising to anyone that I would want to take a swing at a tech venture, and came up with the idea for Family Fridge, which is what I went onto the Dragon's Den with a
I
million years
watched the
ago now.
recording yesterday. I
Oh
watched
my
the recording
god!
from the Dragon's Den.
Oh god! I can't watch it. It's so cringeworthy. Do I come across all right?
No, you do, but there's so much tension in the room, which I think is intentional, right? They make this high pressure environment. The way how it's all staged is like, they put you under pressure. They're like questioning your idea and your pitch, and you're
Mm,
there. You don't know, did they like it or did they absolutely hate it? It just seems like you have absolutely no idea how they're gonna react to it, right? So
yeah.
I could just feel the pressure, and I think you were really good, and you had an answer to every question, and even when they challenged you, you were just like, okay. And yeah, obviously, I mean, in the end, both of the dragons wanted to invest in you, so.
Yeah, I guess that was a definitely a positive outcome. I mean, that was 2009, so we're talking like 15 years ago, which is a lifetime. Um, it was a great experience. I mean, that business, so Family Fridge, for anyone listening, it was intended to be a social network for your immediate family, those you are cohabiting with, really. A private social network to share photos, to share to-do lists and calendars, and also gifts, gift lists and ideas and things like that. Really nicely designed, quite ahead of its time in terms of the UX at that point. And
That was in the era when Facebook was just kind of starting, I suppose, right? Because
that's
Facebook was
right, yeah.
founded a few years earlier, so probably just kind of maybe started gaining popularity a little bit in Europe.
Yeah, 100%. That idea was totally inspired by Facebook, and then there was a million people like me who were just like, "Yeah, we're going to do Facebook for this, we're going to do Facebook for that," and
Mm.
and that went on for like a decade afterwards. But I'd noticed that I wasn't willing to connect with my mother actually on Facebook because I got a friend request from her, and I'd already uploaded enough photos of me, out drinking or looking like an idiot in certain settings, and I just thought like this is not the place to connect our family, and I think that resonated with most people. I think most people felt the same.
Mm.
It's funny now that it's only parents who are really on Facebook,
Yeah.
and everyone else has moved away. But yeah, that was again, it's like curious. Is this a problem? Yeah, I think enough people kind of get what I'm
So
saying.
so that mother's friend request kind of triggered the whole idea.
Yeah, it was that. It was that.
See, there are ideas everywhere.
There are literally, and look, ideas are cheap. We should say,
Mm.
ideas. if you set your mind to it, you could have a pretty decent idea every day or multiple a day. The execution of them is everything, which is hackneyed knowledge, but it's true. So I thought, we could build Facebook for families. Let's get on with it. Go on to Dragon's Den. Loved the experience of pitching. I was nervous as hell going into that. I mean, it's just such an exciting phase. You're thinking about all the potential outcomes, all the people that are going to see you. The BBC exposure that we got was great. It surfaced people from my distant past, I hadn't seen since primary school, who were like, "Hey Lex, I saw you on Dragon's Den," and that was nice. And it generated lots of partnership inquiries, 20,000, 30,000 users in the days following the broadcast. And yeah, I got 2 offers, and I shook hands with someone who I thought was the real deal. I thought that they sold themselves very well, and they were well known, and the CV was good. And I thought, for a tech business, she's the one. Like, no questions about it. Shook hands, and now I look back, and I think it was 20 grand I was asking for.
Yeah.
Okay, so particularly in today's money, 20 grand is not going to get you very far with anything in tech.
And that was for 30% of the company, which I thought was quite a lot.
Yeah, right. I mean, I was obviously really naive. I was just very excited to get the support, because I think at that age, kind of early 20s, you think it's all going to kind of come together. You get the exposure, you get a AAA backer, you start to build a team, you get more money. It'll just happen. You'll just will it to all happen, and it will happen. And she turned out to be a bad actor, someone who has, in the last 15 years, left dozens and dozens of people in her wake, unpaid bills for professional services, misappropriated government funds, all sorts of terrible stuff. I mean, not just sloppy. I'm talking kind of illegal activity, and is now I think in a territory where she can't be extradited. So she was a bad egg, and I didn't know that to start with. It took me a while to figure that out, and probably a year or so. And she kept deferring meetings. She moved me into her offices, and this is where you let shiny things blind your judgment. So she had these really gorgeous offices in Devonshire Square, which is just outside Liverpool Street Station. And she gave me a room in her office there, and I'm like 23, 24, thinking, great, this is, I'm got my office in Liverpool Street. I've got this person who sold her business for 50 million backing me. I'm counting the checks already in my mind. But she just kept deferring meetings and making requests that were simple. Like, I'm not sure about the year 3 projection for this on this model, on this spreadsheet. Well, consumer pre-revenue tech play, like year 3, who knows? Literally finger in the air, and it will definitely be wrong. So you make a tweak, 10 minutes, done, send it back. Oh, I can't actually review this for another 2 weeks, and can we sit down and talk about when I'm back in 3 weeks time? And I'm like, well, yeah, I kind of need the money to get going with some stuff. So I wasn't confident enough to go and fundraise away from her. And I would give this advice to any particularly young founders: like, do not idolize investors too much. Like, go with your gut feeling on whether they're a good actor or a bad actor. Do they respect your time? And if they don't, just cut quickly. I think it's like being in a bad relationship, and taking an investor is like starting a relationship. In many cases, it's 7 years until they get an exit, which is the average length of a marriage, I think, or it used to be, at least, right? So it's a relationship. And if it's bad, and if you sense that it's bad early on, then you need to break up, and you need to do it quickly. And so I didn't. I let her kind of spin lines for a year or so, by which point I'd lost a lot of momentum, and it was really then hard to go and fundraise away from her, which I did eventually. But everyone's like, well, what's happened in the last year? And I'm like, well, we didn't really grow, and we haven't got any new products, and we've lost one of our developers, and it's not an exciting investment story at that point. So I took those lessons forward. And the lessons were kind of what not to do as an investor, like
Mm-hmm.
how not to
Mm-hmm.
conduct yourself, and as an entrepreneur as well, how to vet your investor and how to trust your gut and not idolize people. And that's definitely something that I've done um, up until fairly recently, probably up until I became a father myself. Was seeking. You could be really Freudian and say it's me looking for a father figure because my dad, who was an awesome man but passed away when I was young. Maybe it's that, I don't know, but we probably all do it. We all look at certain people and put them on a pedestal and think, if I could get their backing, it would be amazing. Or if I could get even just half an hour with them,
Mm-hmm.
it could be tectonic for my business or for whatever it is I'm trying to do. And 9 times out of 10, you'll be disappointed. People are really
Mm-hmm.
flawed, and you'll meet them and you'll be like, they're a bit rude, or they're not that engaged, or they're a bit hyperactive, or they're a bit dismissive, or they don't get what I'm talking about, and I'm being really articulate and detailed and clear. And um, you can waste a lot of time, and you can have a lot of misplaced faith and stock in the
Yeah.
wrong people. So I would urge others to be very wary of that. It's important to be polite and to pay deference where it's due, but temper it and don't let the optics of someone's reputation or their achievements cloud your judgment on what they are like as a person.
It's
Um,
hard. It's pretty difficult.
yeah, it's hard. It's hard because we're so used to everyone obviously broadcasts their achievements. So
Mm-hmm.
if you follow well-known people and you're like, oh, they literally everything they touch turns to gold. They just smash everything. Their output's so great, such high quality, so successful. You dig beneath the surface and you're going to find someone who's possibly crying into their pillow with depression and been
Yeah.
divorced twice and had been bankrupt 3 times and all the rest of it. Not to say that makes somebody better or worse, or they're a good or bad person. It's just a fact of life. And um, yeah, and it's just to be a bit careful with that. Focus on yourself a little bit more. But anyway, I took that experience forward into setting up Q Ventures.
Mm-hmm.
I wanted to do something in the investment space. I'm like, I've just been dicked around by somebody, and I found it quite painful. And I felt like I was in quite a good position to do something. And I'd had this intermediate. I'd had a job, first job actually after that, some years after, working with the Supper Club, which is now called
Mm-hmm.
Hell. And the Supper Club, again, for anyone who's a founder of a business with, I think the qualifier is now 1 million turnover per annum.
I think so.
Um,
Yeah.
but it's a great group for peer support, and it's all vetted, and they balance the membership with industry, so you don't just get sold to. And there's a series of intimate dinners every month, and it's great. A really good place for other founders to to just meet and share stories, and a bit like Entrepreneurs Anonymous in a way. And
Mm-hmm.
I got a job with them. I got a job there, hosting a lot of the dinners and being a bit of a go between the members, largely tasked with bringing on new members, so going to meet with people, and then set up an investment club within the Supper Club. And I loved it. This was an education that you couldn't pay for. You're in these
Mm-hmm.
intimate dinners with founders talking about their struggles and other people giving advice based upon their experience. It was fantastic, and I think it's a really special group actually, and I am still an ambassador for them, and will fly the flag if I ever get the opportunity to do so. But it was amazing for my learnings across different sectors, and then I set up the investment club, which was fairly informal. It was pretty much soon to be or already exited founders within the Supper Club who had some
Mm-hmm.
liquidity that wanted to back the next generation. And we would do one event a quarter, something like that. And that's where I got the bug for kind of being the intermediary. It's a little bit like going back to school and wanting to be the popular person again. if everyone thinks you're well connected to investors and investors think you're well connected to lots of startup opportunities, you put yourself in a valuable position in the middle. And I really enjoyed it.
Yes. Yeah.
And the curiosity there just gets fed daily, right? You haven't, you know, you're looking through businesses and assessing them for investability. And then I was kind of, through chance, introduced to a wonderful friend, who's now a wonderful friend, a guy called David Mickler, who had sold his business to Yahoo, early days, a big exit, you know, a notable newspaper-worthy exit, and was fantastic, very open-minded, very curious, very kind guy, and we just hit it off straight away. He was a bit older than me, but there was just something we could tell we were kind of on the same page philosophically, I think. And um, he a month or so after we first met, calls me up and said, "I've just bumped into this guy. I just had lunch with this guy who's founded Quintessentially. If you've ever heard of Quintessentially," and I
Mm.
don't think I have. He said, "Well, all of the um, kind of concierge services for Amex Black or Amex Centurion and HSBC Jade and all the kind of top hotel chains, all their concierge is run by Quintessentially on a white label basis. 150,000 high net worth members around the world, and a trusted brand that organizes their travel and schools for their kids and restaurant and event bookings and all sorts of things." Um, and he's interested in starting an investment club, an investment network for them. Are you keen? I was like, fuck yeah, I'm keen. Um, let's do it. So a week later, I went in to pitch a vision for what's now Q Ventures, which is essentially an investment club, it's filling in the Series A gap, connecting the most promising early stage businesses with high net worth, ultra high net worths. Um, and I go into this meeting in on Portland Place, very grand, prestigious building on Portland Place, part of the Crown Estate, I believe. You know, along with the embassies, there to impress or
Mm.
to overwhelm in some instances. But going to meet with one of the three founders of Quintessentially, and this guy from my school is in the room as well. And he's, you know, I was pally with him at school. He was a couple of years above, but he was like best mates with my best mate's brother, who was also at the same school. And it was just one of those things that you walk into a room and go, "Hey, man, what are you doing here?" He's like, "Oh, Lex, what are you doing here? I haven't seen you for a while." Um, and so it was an easy meeting, and it does speak to the value of, you know, the old school tie network. Like, I'm not a huge one for nepotism and things like that, but um, you put yourself in the right places and you meet the right people, and it does help. You can't get away from that. And it's, you know,
Mm. Yeah.
I know it's easier for some people to do that than others, and that there's a rebalancing that needs to take place there. But anyway, I digress. It was fortunate for me, and I'm very grateful. And so that gave birth to Q Ventures, which, you know, fast forward, I don't know what we're talking, 9 years, 8 or 9 years now, and we have facilitated around 250 million of
Mm-hmm.
investment into about 210 companies, something like that. I have seen thousands and thousands of companies and hosted scores of events and built a network of family offices and VCs, obviously, as part of that, and angels and larger angels and all those kinds of things. And then yeah, I loved it. I loved it up to a point where I began to feel like I'd had enough of being an intermediary. You know, as an intermediary, you kind of got to bend over both ways, and after a while, I got the itch. I'm like, I need to build something again. Because
Mm.
it's a human business. Investment
Mm.
intermediary is, you know, it's about relationships, and that's great. And I enjoy building relationships, but it's difficult to scale. There was no tech underneath it that was really, you know, powering its growth. And so I had an idea inspired by the growth of alternative investment platforms, really kind of equity crowdfunding, peer-to-peer lending, property investment platforms was starting to kind of make some noise. Crowdcube and Seeders were in the relatively early days, only maybe 2-3 years in, um, and and I just thought investors should be able to access all the deal flow in this kind of alternative asset class in one place. So because I had good relationships with the platform founders, I built an aggregator of all their deal flow. So there was one interface you would see all of the deals across about 20 different platforms: equity, crowdfunding, property, peer-to-peer loans. And we called it Tender, Tendr.
Mhm.
It was a mobile app, and it used a Tinder style swipe interface. And the reason for that was because I'd found in whenever I was picking up the phone to pitch a business to somebody, you just need to capture the essence of the opportunity. You waffle on for too long with busy people and you've lost it. You just haven't got the time. So I need to pick up the phone and go, Mattis, got this deal. It's Facebook for dogs. They're raising 1 million. They've got 750K of it done. It's got one of the founders of Skype in as the main guy. That's enough information for you to put it into the, oh, do you know what? Tell me a bit more. Or no,
Mhm.
that's just not my kind of thing bucket. And that's all I wanted to achieve was that first filter. And so a Tinder style swipe interface where you just see the opportunity in one sentence and the raise, size, sector, yada yada, was really effective. And so we ended up having to change the name. We got a cease and desist on that name. So we changed it to Offer, OFF3R, which is a bit of an odd name, but it was like an alternative offering. I don't know. Um, but we got amazing coverage for that. We got like 20,000 investors signed up really quickly. We had this huge
Wow.
TechCrunch, which was shared more times on the day. The new MacBook was announced on the same day.
What?
We got more shares for that article than the Mac article. So, and that's normally a pretty big deal, right? So we got tons of investors, tons of signups, lots of traction. Um, but it was a hard business. It was, and I was running this consecutively um, alongside Q Ventures, and it was an awkward negotiation because Q Ventures had investors. We'd raised some money, and I'd taken some of that resource to build this side venture, and so there's another lesson in there, which is about it's a massive flag, and I see it quite a lot that people typically typically it's as a result of trying to find bolt on things that are more attractive, but hairy business structures where it's like, yeah, we started like this, but then we set up a new co because it was doing something really specific, and then we raise a bit of money into the new co, but then investors there don't get access to the first company and yada yada. As an investor, if you're looking at that proposition, you're like, I just haven't got the time to get my head around it.
Mhm.
And so and then you've got definitely challenges in managing stakeholders and their expectations and what's fair. People that invested in the first company didn't think it was going to be a tech company that was aggregating deal flow from other platforms. I sold in the idea and everyone was very supportive, and I think entrepreneurs need to do that and be able to pivot and things. But um, yeah, it was awkward. It took up a lot of time in managing expectations. Um, Matters. I'm conscious. I've been talking. I mean, literally just talking, talking, talking. Like, am I? Is there anything specifically you wanted to kind of touch on, or yeah,
I think you're a good storyteller, and you just went through your journey, which I was gonna ask you about the individual companies anyway. So I have a lot of questions. I mean, I think we could probably be sitting here for 5 hours.
well, yeah, yeah. I'm conscious, just
Go-
conscious of that. I mean, um, I'll fast forward it a little bit from here, and I should say also in between all these things, and kind of in addition to all these things, there's been maybe maybe 15 to 20 mini projects that I've explored. And when I say
Mhm.
explored, and I think a lot of us do this, right? You get very excited, you come up with an idea, you start looking to see if the domain is available, right? That's one of the first things you do.
Yeah.
It just helps to solidify the idea in your mind, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, yeah, I can get an off the shelf company. I'll just start a company for this thing, and I'll start talking to some people, and I'll put a business plan together, and I'll start sketching some wireframes for what I think it could be. So in amongst all of this, there's probably during that sort of decade period, 15 to 20 other things,
Mm.
whether it's, a short Poplet was one, which was like, I thought, all this vacant commercial property there should be a marketplace to rent commercial property on a very short term, day by day lease. Which is basically what a peer here ended up doing. Or we should have an app that lets you take a photograph of a house and gives you all the land registry details and the time it was last sold based upon the geo data. And or then a local notice board, which is going to be a bit like Twitter, but location based, and went to a hackathon and enjoyed this weekend of crazy kind of energy building, basically an MVP for that app in one weekend, which was insane. So there's loads of little bits interspersed with it, which is.
How do you usually approach? So you said there were like 15, 20 different projects, and there's one episode, I think it's a public episode, where me and my business partner talk about how we started. Was it like 10 or 12 or something different projects within 1 year, right? So
Mhm.
there's a story behind that, and we just wanted to test as many different things as possible, and then some of them worked a little bit. Two of them are still alive, or maybe three, let's say. Most of them didn't work at all, right? But I'm curious. So we would usually just obviously buy a domain, set up a website, just make it as quick and dirty as possible. Just how can we make this look like it's an actual business, and how can we try to sell something? And then if we sell something, okay, then maybe we're onto something. Let's look at the next step. So
Yeah.
I'm curious how you approach those things. I think that might be interesting also for a lot of people to hear, especially for those who are thinking of starting something.
Yeah, I think you need to put a stake in the ground, right? And I think, you get the domain or you put up a website with a website builder. It helps you to visualize and imagine what it will feel like to run, to have that kind of a business. And then it gives you some collateral to share with, your trusted circle, friends, family, colleagues, whoever. Um, so that's all part of a qualifying exercise. And there are sometimes I wish I didn't put a website together or register a company, because then I have to end up dissolving the company later because I didn't carry on with it. And you've got
Mm,
that kind of annoying aftermath clear up to do. Um, but I think it's necessary to go some way down the line and get this thing where you can start to help other people visualize what it is that you'd like to sell or build or do.
mhm,
So I think your process there is great, and I think also as a test for yourself, to gauge your own enthusiasm for it over a period of
mm,
time. Because if you're going to commit to a business, you're going to be in it, if it's successful, for 5, 7, 10 plus years, and you need to give yourself a chance to feel it out. It's a kind of, it's the tester period for you. It's the try before you buy period. And I think you need to own that. You shouldn't be ashamed of killing something for the sake of, of it.
mhm.
And a lot of people, I think, carry on because, again, pride gets the better of them. They don't want to be the person that's like, oh, Lex has tried another thing. Oh, one of these days
Yeah,
he'll get there.
yeah, yeah.
It's fine. It's like an artist, and I think it's the same as being a musician or being an artist, right? You'll write a million crap tracks. You'll paint 1,000 awful canvases.
Yeah.
In amongst it, the ones you really invest in, the ones you really care about, the ones that can sustain your attention and your passion, are the ones that stand a better chance of making it. And that's sometimes not to do with the commercial opportunity or how good an idea it is. It's how much you like it, how passionate you are about it, and that will carry you a long way. Some of the best businesses have been built by people that just cared about solving a problem, and the commercial element was not immediately obvious, or
Mm,
the pushback um, from the market was intense, particularly for
mm,
innovation. Right, there's lots of quotes and examples of Henry Ford putting out there, asking people what they want, and it's a faster horse. So you got to be like,
mm.
I'm telling you, the motor car is the future. I'm just going to do it, and you'll see. And of course he's right. But Yeah, I think it's important to move quickly. So the mantras there is move quickly, move cheaply, um, and don't be afraid to kill it when you feel it should be killed. Perhaps even a little bit before you get that very definite feeling. Kill it.
Uh-huh. Makes sense. And I love that you brought that up because, we can all see the companies that were successful, like the things that you started and you were running for a while and maybe you exited, or the media stories, right? And so that's all nice, but we don't actually hear about those 15 or 20 that just failed in the process, right? Or that maybe you just started and
Yeah,
then
yeah,
it didn't go anywhere.
yeah. Over the years, I've often flirted with the idea of fail con, like a conference that
Uh-huh.
celebrates failure, and um, I think it would be a really interesting story. I think it's the stuff you don't hear about. Like, I'm a voracious consumer of biographies. Love reading
Mm-hmm.
or listening to biographies. It's really boring when you get to the point where it's become the company that you know, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
always the
Mm-hmm.
genesis story is always the most interesting part for me, and it's the things that didn't work along the way that are really interesting. We don't really live in a culture that perhaps in the UK or Europe that celebrates failure in the same way as maybe in the US.
Mm-hmm.
I think, in my experience, it may have changed in recent years, but you know, failure is seen as worn as a kind of badge of honor in the US.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yeah, again, you've earned your stripes, you've figured out what not to do, which increases your chance of knowing what to do. That makes perfect sense. In the UK and Europe, for some reason, we're a little bit more kind of tribal, and we're a bit like, yeah, I knew it wasn't. I thought it might not work. Yeah, I
Yeah.
did.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I wasn't sure his market was big enough. Yeah, I didn't think the product was great. Like his messaging was a bit off. Like people, they like to pick over the bones a little bit more, and
Mm-hmm.
so I don't think that conference would work very well in our market. But these are fascinating stories. I'd love to see the scrapbooks of people that have built really amazing things, and see how many other things there were on the list.
One example that I don't know how well known it is. I think I talked about it before. Is this guy Peter Levels, he's quite well known on Twitter as within the indie founders or solo entrepreneurs community, because he built a few projects that are very successful. Again, especially within that community. But so he's a solo founder. He doesn't have a team. I think he has like one or two contractors, but that's all. And he's publicly sharing all his numbers, and I don't know what his latest revenue is, but he does a few million in revenue per year with something crazy like 80% profit margins, right? So
Mm.
that's a lot for a lot of people from financial perspective and a headache perspective. That's the dream. Like, you get no people to manage and just do this crazy profit machine that's just printing money every day.
Love that.
um, what he shared once. So now he has, let's say, three projects, maybe, or let's say three businesses that are very profitable, and another three that make a little bit of money. But he shared the whole list of things that he ever launched, and I think there were over 100 different websites, 100 different projects, potential businesses. 99 of them failed, right? Three of
Mm,
them are making millions, and three of them are making a few grand a year.
mm,
So, but that's what it takes, and it's really fascinating when you see that. It's really cool that he decided to share that. When you
mm.
see what it really takes, and that you just need to, well, he just had to keep going, right? And
Yeah,
sometimes it's hard when 10 things in a row fail, and you're like, fuck, like
yeah.
what am I doing wrong?
Oh, I mean, yeah, I've been through that. I had to call things a day after I'd invested quite a lot of myself or capital into things, and that's hard. And you're like, what am I going to do now? It doesn't take very long for you to get a bee in your bonnet about doing something else. You can't really, don't know, you can't really change that. It becomes harder as you have dependents, and there are people that you're responsible for, and
Mm-hmm.
things that shifts slightly. But yeah, absolutely. 10 years of blood, sweat, and tears to make something look like an overnight success. And um, very few examples of the Zuckerbergs of the world, right? Okay, he would maybe cite whatever it was he did before, like the two or three small, very quick things he did before as like failures. And it's a bit sickly, but oh, Mark Zuckerberg's experienced failure when he was like
Mm,
19 and it was a month's worth of project that he didn't cost him any money. You know, wow, he must be so rounded. He's not. He just, went from basically day one to like the top of the tree. Those happen like 10 times in a generation, maybe. That's it. And I think that a lot of people, because it's been glamorized so much, and I think particularly for younger founders, if you don't go from zero to a billionaire on your first venture within 3 years without any kind of ups or downs, then you know you're going to be a leader of the generation. If you can deal with not being a leader of the next generation and just someone who's incredibly successful, doing something really worthwhile and amazing and enjoying life, be prepared to take a few swings at it. As long as you learn from each one, and it doesn't take too much out of you as a person, and you don't sacrifice too much, then just keep swinging until you hit it. And I don't know what else you can do, really. I don't know what the alternative to that is.
mm. Yeah, there's a lot of other paths to take there. Exactly. Mm, so I want to jump to Basket, which is your current business, right? That you're building. So
Yeah.
maybe the first question is just for everyone to know what is it? How do you describe it?
So Basket is really looking to reimagine the online shopping experience, and to that the first product, or the primary uh, use case for Basket in its current iteration is save anything that you're thinking of buying from anywhere online to one place, whether it's an e-commerce store, whether it's a shopping app, it doesn't matter. You can store anything when you're in that pre-purchase phase to one place simply by, we're a browser extension and a mobile app, and you just share to the Basket app. So everything's in one place, whether it's televisions, teapots, handbags, or holidays. It's all in one place, and we will then track the price for you. We'll let you know if that item or items go on sale. We'll also let you know if they come back into stock. And it's a great way to stay organized, to move on from just having a million browser tabs open, or having screenshots that get lost in your camera roll,
Mm,
or putting links onto a spreadsheet or a notes app, which is, all of those things are storing purchase intent in static repositories, which is crazy. Like,
mm,
there's just a better way
mm,
to do it. So we exist to help people to be more organized with their shopping, to save money really simply, really elegantly. And that's where we are now. There are many things on the roadmap to help. Essentially, the vision is for Basket to be the shopper's companion, to be an aid to your relationship with consumerism, actually. Like, not a
mm,
product discovery platform, not a cheap, chintzy discount deals, voucher code, noisy platform, but a genuinely useful tool to help you to buy better, to feel more in control of your relationship with
mhm.
consumerism. So yeah, there's many nuanced points underneath it, but ultimately it's simple. If you've used Pinterest or Pocket, you could describe it as that, but built for e-commerce.
For me, when I looked at it, I the one sentence description that I guess resonated with me was, save whatever you want to buy and you'll be notified when that thing is on a discount. So you'll be able to buy it at a lower price.
Yeah.
And it reminded me of a story that was incredibly successful a few years ago, which is Honey, right? Which I'm sure you're familiar
Hmm.
with. Honey
Yeah.
was, for those who don't know, I think Honey was one of those stories where every founder, when we heard about it, we were like, why on earth did I not think of that? How did I not build a Chrome plugin that sold for billions of dollars? How did I not do that? Because that was on the surface, at least, it seems very simple, right? It was a Chrome plugin that on when you were shopping online, on the checkout page, it would, I think it just searched for, or they probably had a large database of discount codes, and they would just search through all their discount codes, try to apply all of them, and if you were lucky, you were able to check out with a discount, right?
Hmm.
But yeah, the crazy part was that that was acquired by PayPal for a billion or billions, probably billions.
4 billion, four billion
Four
dollars.
billion. So
Mm,
a
yeah,
crazy story.
yeah,
Um, is that kind of the direction that you're also aiming for?
yeah. I mean, I discovered that after we started Basket,
Uh-huh.
that story. So that wasn't the inspiration, but I was very buoyed to see that happen. Yeah, like you say, like so many founders are just like, what the hell? $4 billion for a browser extension. Haven't got to maintain, like haven't got to maintain mobile apps on different platforms. It's just did one thing really well, and it's a lovely story. And yeah, and it has inspired a lot of people to look more closely at the browser extension space, particularly,
Mm,
but also kind of discounts. And it's interesting. It has become a lot of the what we would describe as kind of the middleware in the affiliate space, which um, is occupied by cashback and by voucher codes and um, those kinds of things. It's all become largely commoditized now. You kind of expect to get cashback as part of your banking offering or as part of a plugin somewhere. Voucher codes, they're everywhere, and of varying quality. um, it would be very difficult to build a brand now that is doing kind of either just cashback or voucher codes. They're expected as bolt-on features in the same way as I always refer to Clubhouse. Remember Clubhouse, the darling of the
hmm.
pandemic, right?
Yeah.
What they built there was a feature, not a business. Um, Very easy for other platforms, social platforms. Oh yeah, we can add like voice chat rooms on to our offering, and there you go.
Mm,
That's what it's done. So it was a feature. It was a commodity, and I think that's what a lot of um, kind of shopping incentive platforms like voucher code sites and cashback sites essentially are now. So we're keen not to be seen as that. Or there's a much bigger opportunity um, in giving people this tool, which is just it's there without the noise to keep you organized. I mean, how many times have you stumbled across things when you're browsing online and you're just like, wow, that's a cool t-shirt, or that's a holiday that I might like to go on, or that's a TV that I think, when we come to upgrade, it might not be for 6 months to a year, but that's a TV that kind of I would like, or here's a game that I'd
mm,
like to play. We all do it. We do it all the time. We're always kind of checking things we might want to consume. So we want to be the best in the world at capturing that intent and not doing it in a way that's all just driven by the needs of the advertisers underneath it. So, hey, Matthias, you've got this, you've added this television to your basket. Here's 15 different offers and voucher codes for not the same TV, but similar TVs. And here's one for the same TV. It's just noise. You're like, enough of
mm.
the noise. I like shopping. I enjoy shopping, or I used to, let's say. It's big. It is now. It feels like it's become too noisy and too driven by the needs of the retailers and the merchants, whereas it should be the consumers that need to be put first. Particularly as if we're in or we're coming out of, but the cost of living crisis and people being more conscious about what they're spending. Yeah, it's a great time. I feel very passionately about what we're building.
Nice. And so that's a company now that it's been in the media a little bit. I think you're relatively good at PR. Also, just getting when you raise a round where, um, when probably when you launched as well. I think there was a you managed to get into the media. You got investment from the founder of BrewDog as well, which is, for those who don't know, maybe the billion-dollar beer company from the UK, right? Um, so looks like it's on a trajectory to be a big story.
I believe so. Yeah, I absolutely believe so. Like it brings together a lot of the things that I've really been passionate about and interested in over the last, I guess, since the beginning of my entrepreneurial journey. Building something that's useful, that's really, really scalable, that is kind of sits on top of existing things rather than necessarily needs to be
Mm-hmm.
integrated with. And we've got great backers. You mentioned James; he's awesome. The CEO, co-founder of BrewDog. Yeah, he's been a real help and provided some great intros. But we've got, yeah, the
Ah, so
founder.
he's actually like you have a closer relationship than just here's the money.
Yeah, so we'll have a fairly frequent catch up and back and forth over WhatsApp, which I do with
Nice.
all of my stakeholders. So I've always taken the time to just really work on stakeholder relations.
Hmm.
It's really, really important. You cannot underestimate it. And we've got our lead investor is Lightbank, which is a Chicago-based venture capital firm set up by one of the Groupon co-founders. Largely with his own money, he's the main LP. So our backers are the founders of Groupon, the co-founder of BrewDog, the co-founder of ClearScore, the co-founder of Miniclip, for those who know the mobile games company
Hmm.
that's driven about 5 billion downloads. Um, the co-founder of Crowdcube, Darren, who was the CEO up until fairly recently as well, is an investor, and the founder of Mumsnet, and our most supportive angel, Jonathan Quinn, who's a wonderful guy, super smart and very generous with his time. He sold Ant. So he sold his business to Ant Financial. World First was
Hmm.
a B2B currency exchange business, which I think was a sale of around $700 million or sterling. I'm not sure, but a huge and wonderful exit, and he's been our most supportive, most involved angel from the earliest stage as well. So we've got awesome backers, but you need to keep people updated, through good times and bad times, and get them involved, get them excited, ask for their help. You know, people
Hmm.
people invest for lots of different reasons, principally for some kind of a financial return, but also through not quite altruistic reasons, but through a sense of wanting to give back and impart knowledge on the next generation. And giving advice is a great form of nostalgia, um,
Hmm. Hmm.
and
Hmm.
people really they love that. They feel that it makes their time spent on this rock more worthwhile if they can pass on that knowledge. And so asking people for advice, being being fairly firm in whether you take it or not. You don't want to
Hmm.
you can't be a sponge of everyone's opinions and end up outputting some kind of bastard child deformed thing that's not owned by anybody and doesn't really stand out. You can't please everybody. um but yeah, take it on board, court people, ask for introductions, ask who's in their network. It could be strategic, it could be capital, it could be other things. You never know. Like, just be really treat it like your own social network. I've got WhatsApp groups for my larger investors. I've got another WhatsApp group for, we did a crowd round on Crowdcube as part of this. So there's 750 crowd investors, which is a
Hmm.
small marketing army when we want
Hmm.
to really flex it as well. Um, yeah, like I love that part. I love the human part of raising money, and we've raised now around about 5 million for Basket, and we'll be raising again, probably
Hmm.
halfway through this year, because the venture requires, or deserves rather, a an opportunity to really scale out internationally and to bolt on new features. We've got 135,000 users now. We
Hmm.
have around 20 to 30,000 products being added to people's baskets every day by
Wow.
by users, generating 1,000 sales per day, something like that, of our merchants' products. It's working, and we've only just started. So you can very easily put another zero or another two zeros after all those metrics,
Hmm.
and there'll still be plenty of headroom. Just that it's the nature of the space we're operating in. So yeah, it's great. I'm feeling very, very bullish about it, and I love it. And I'm also building a product, and this is another important learning. I'm building a product that I'm passionate about. And I know that sounds like
Hmm.
an obvious thing to say, but sometimes you can get carried away on what you think is a good idea for other people, or people a bit
Hmm.
like you but not quite like you, and that's because you've read an article here or you've spoken to a person there. There's nothing quite as powerful as building a solution to your own problem,
Mm.
because your subconscious is always worrying on, like, this could be better,
Yeah.
that should be better, that doesn't make sense, this needs to be there. You're not reliant upon other people to tell you so much what it should be. You just build
Yeah.
what
Yeah.
you think it should be, which is easier to do if you're passionate. If you're not, you'll be found out soon enough.
That makes sense. You really identify with that problem, and you really, yeah, you really understand your target audience, right?
Mm,
Um, got a few questions about basket, but I also, so one thing that I noticed, you talked about investor relationships, right? And so I'm assuming that obviously your career in investments also helped you get, connected to the right investors and help you raise the funding, as well as your track record, right? Just having been involved with so many businesses, I'm sure that helped raise money. But I think what I've gathered is I think you're generally good at building relationships and maintaining relationships, and that's been a core thread throughout life, and that's been important to you. So you talked about investor relationships, but I'm also curious, do you have any general advice for, again, both building and maintaining relationships within business, right? So networking if you want, but networking is kind of a word that we don't like to use so much. One
mm,
example, you mentioned the supper club before, right? Which I think is great. I've heard of it before. I'm not a member, but I just joined recently something similar, which is called the Dynamite Circle, and
mm,
it's been the best $500 I've spent maybe ever, right? It's just
mm,
you got a peer group of like-minded people who are all facing the same problems as you are, and some of them are a few steps ahead of you, and they've already solved those problems, and you can just talk to them.
yeah.
And you met a lot of amazing people who you can hang out with. Um, and I'm planning on joining at least one more similar organization this year, because I just see the value of it, and I want to join another one which is maybe even more advanced than the Dynamite Circle is.
Mm.
I think that's one of the good ways to meet people, and I'm always looking for other ways to meet and then maintain those relationships, especially because I find it's sometimes easier to meet people than it is to actually stay in touch with them.
Yeah. Um, it gets harder as you get older and take on more commitments to be able to allocate your time well. You need to
Mm,
be, I think, if you're in the earlier part of your entrepreneurial career, you can afford to go to that questionable networking event, or maybe go for that drink or for that coffee with that person you're not quite sure whether they're legit or they're crazy or quite what, and you just think of, you can afford to take some risk with your time. And it's all about the value of time, I suppose, and choices about how you allocate that most precious of resource. um, I used to be a lot more open and happy to take calls and happy to do this and go to this event and that event, and I'm less so now, because
mm,
I value spending time with my family, and I value time spent on my health and fitness, and obviously my main business, or my only business. Um, so I exercise quite a lot of discretion now, I think, with building the relationship or starting the relationship, but then maintaining it. Like, you're right, it takes time. And I used to plot on spreadsheets, kind of a matrix of who knew who, how I met that person, notes on that person. I used to have my kind of personal,
mm,
like a CRM, really, for me and
mm,
my network. I was like, oh, that guy mentioned he knew this guy who's at that company. I know someone else at that company, and it was an intricate web. I used forget the name of it now. It was a CRM that integrated with Gmail. Um, yeah, with an S. It was just really easy to use,
uh-huh.
and I would have lots of voice notes attached to it and stuff like that. And this belief that I could build this intricate web of relationships that I could then leverage at the right time, and it's driven out of self interest, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Um, which is always a bit of an unhealthy driver. But of course it is. Of course it's driven out of self-interest, not just, I've got loads of time to dick around and make friends and maintain those relationships. The art, I guess, of maintaining those relationships is not coming across like you're taking from
Mm-hmm.
from other people too much. So you need to be there thinking about other people. Who can I introduce them to that will add some value? What little article can I share with them that will let them know that I'm thinking of them, or that, I'm actively, out there wanting to maintain this relationship. It takes work. It's the same as with your personal life, and your friendship circle, and maintaining friendships. Just a slightly different bent on it. That's all. And I think I drank a little bit too much of my own Kool-Aid in believing that the value of building a network was so immense. It is,
Hmm.
to a point. Um,
Hmm. Interesting.
it is to a point. There's nothing better than building something that's fucking awesome and getting the attention of people. Then the network will come to you. When
Hmm.
you've got to go out and constantly flex it, like I found it a lot with raising money, people would get bored of, yeah, I think that, again, it's ego can get the better of you. It's nice to be the guy in the room who's like, oh yeah, I know Dan, or I know Sue, or I know, XYZ. I can, can it make an introduction for you? You feel like you're floating around like the Fonz, or like some mass, super well connected guy, the kingmaker. And a lot of the time, if you're constantly going to people saying, "Oh, I'm raising some money for this thing, can we go have a chat?" Like, or I need something the whole time. You quickly find out how strong those relationships are. And I've more than once in my career kind of thought I've had this great group of people to go to. I've gone to them with something, gotten a lukewarm response, and just thought, fuck. I thought they were going to just support me no matter what. I thought that was a given. I thought I'd built this relationship to be strong enough to just get their backing, irrespective of what it is I'm doing, almost. And that's couldn't be further from the truth. Like, when you
Hmm.
boil it down, when you're talking about decent size, decent chunks of money, or decent chunks of people's time or reputation, they guard it very closely. And there's no free pass into that. You need to come up with something that's great, that's compelling, that's, you've put a lot into, and then maybe you'll get it, maybe you won't. But um yeah, in a way, one of the things I wouldn't have, if I was doing things again, I wouldn't have spent so much time networking and placing so much value in the network. um
Do you
yeah.
think you would spend more time sharing what you're doing or just sharing what you've done, so for that network to come to you? Although I do think, again, I think I've seen, there's a lot of news articles about the things that you are doing or you have been doing, so maybe you're fairly good at that already.
Maybe I just, again, it's changed with age, and it's now I am really just focused on putting my head down and building something that speaks for
Mm.
itself. Um, Unless you're an entrepreneur or a VC, if I went out on the street and asked somebody who the founder of Love Film and Zoopla and Kazoo was, I bet you they wouldn't be able to tell me it was the same person, right?
Hmm.
Because he
Yeah,
doesn't go
that's
out
true.
there. He's not there on Dragon's Den courting the adoration and the recognition from people. And most of the successful founders that are out there are like that. It's the
Mm.
it's a, and I'm not saying it's right, I'm not saying it's a good thing or a bad thing. If you want to go and build your brand and get, be more recognized, then that's fine. But that people that are doing that are in the minority. There's a
Mm.
huge, majority of founders and entrepreneurs who kept their heads down. They built that steel utilities, boring intermediary transaction engine, whatever it might be, and they're sitting on a boat somewhere in their, in their late 50s, early 60s, and they couldn't care less whether you know their
Mm.
name or not. In fact, they'd rather you didn't, quite
Yeah,
frankly.
exactly. Yeah,
You
that's
know.
see, it's interesting. The previous episode that was just published today was actually with a guy who's a personal branding expert, specifically focused on founders, right? And
Mm,
I see there's a big trend in that, in founders building their brand online, and I think it's a massive leverage. It can be a massive leverage for yourself as a person, but also for your business. But it's also, yeah, important to realize that that's again the same as the Facebooks and Mark Zuckerbergs. It's the thing that you see in the media, but that's not the only way, right? I think
Yeah.
it's a minority. It's the 1% who are doing it that way. But as you said, there's a far greater amount of founders who prefer to just stay anonymous, and they don't want to talk
Yeah,
about
it's
it.
a really interesting topic. I've been thinking about it a lot recently because often, I'm sure you're the same. I feel this compulsion to want to post or to respond to a post somewhere, and then I just think, why bother? Like, and your
Hmm.
guest yesterday, I'm sure, would argue that it's all part of building a brand, and you've got a lot of people that were instant customers, and your voice will carry much further. And I'm sure that's all true, but the amount of time that you would need to invest for that to really move the needle. Um, would detract from your time running and growing the business. And I guarantee that if I
Hmm.
build Basket and I exit for 1 billion, um, then it won't be because I built my personal brand and dedicated so much time to, building a personal brand out of it. I don't
Hmm.
believe it. And maybe that's because I'm 41. If I was 31, it might be slightly different, if I had more time to do it. But more often than not, it's the traction of the business itself that gets the entrepreneur the recognition, rather than the recognition of the entrepreneur driving the business forward.
Hmm. Hmm. I love that. It's a topic that I also think about a lot, and I'm sure a lot of people think about it a lot with social media being present so much, and yeah, this whole personal branding trend taking off. So I love hearing your opinion on it as well. I want to be conscious of time, so I don't want to go on for too long. So maybe is there anything else we should talk about, or do we wrap up here?
Oh man, I mean, we could keep talking, like you said, I'm sure, for 5 hours, and respectful of your time, and listener fatigue by this point as well in the story. So, I mean, I, I guess, yeah, the kind of the lessons that I've learned and things we've touched on. Um, like, enjoy it. Like, look after yourself as a founder. Learn to develop a thick skin. Don't raise money unless you have to. And then when you are going to raise
Hmm.
money, go to the right people. Like, set your expectations accordingly, and don't go and talk to Sequoia. If you are looking for a 50 grand check, for a business that's, a cupcake business in your local area, you're going to be disappointed. So cut your cloth accordingly. Take advice, but don't necessarily act upon it. Assimilate. Um, in the world of social media and image and reputation and all that kind of stuff, just practice disconnecting from it. In my view,
Hmm.
I can't help a little bit but cringe when you see someone who's just posting a photo of them every day, going, "Oh, I'm off to a meeting today." And then, the next day, "Oh, I'm just about to pick up the phone to try and sell somebody something today." It just doesn't feel like a good use of time to me. And so just keep your head
Hmm.
down a little bit. Don't worry about your personal reputation so much. Um, Enjoy things whilst you've got time and freedom. And particularly as a younger entrepreneur, like, travel around, work from different places, enjoy that, soak up different cultures. Be honest with yourself. Don't drink too much of your own Kool-Aid. Find something that you're passionate about. Enjoy being naive. Don't be embrace imposter syndrome.
Hmm.
Naivety is beautiful. You
Hmm.
wouldn't, if you knew how hard things were half the time, you wouldn't start. It's lovely coming to a problem and not being an expert in it to start with, because you're indoctrinated by what you've been doing. So don't be afraid of biting off more than you can chew. Don't be afraid of asking for help. If you sense it's going down the pan, then pull the plug sooner than you think. If you're thinking you'll make the decision next month, you've already made the decision. Pull the plug
Hmm.
tomorrow.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah.
Um, and have a healthy disregard for money. And I mean that in the nicest possible way. Like, you need to disconnect from what it is. It's credits to achieve a vision, and the scale of the vision dictates how many credits you need. But um, investors, if they're backing you, they'll understand the risk profile. They've got great tax write-offs in many cases, in the UK particularly. And they are backing, innovation. Like, don't feel bound by it. Make decisions based upon what you believe, what you know, what you've researched, what you've experienced, and to stay true to yourself. And the investor's money will either grow exponentially or it won't. In most cases, it won't. But yeah, and kind of enjoy the ride. And I'll stop there. Otherwise, it's going to sound like it's going to be something that could just go on and on. But it's yeah, I love it. I'd advise anyone to do it. Entrepreneur, ultimately, the translation, right, is just to start something, to undertake a task.
Uh-huh.
It's just a doer.
Mm-hmm.
To begin, entrepreneur, a task. To do something, it's just getting off the sofa. It's just opening up that GoDaddy domain registration page. It's picking up the phone to your pal who you know is working in that space. It's just that first step of doing, and that's just a very, very special energy. It's the core of kind of innovation and what's progressed our species in many ways. So yeah, love that. If you've got that, keep it going.
Nice. That's a beautiful summary. And for everyone who listened, I have a quick request to make. So, a year ago, this podcast was in the top 15% of most shared on Spotify, which, to be honest, blew my mind because I was not expecting that. But now I know what it takes, and I'm convinced that we can get it to a top 5% this year. But for that, I need everyone's help. So, if you're listening, click the share button or the like button, subscribe, like, or share
Do
it
it.
with somebody so that we'll get to that top 5% together. And that
Do it.
obviously helps also getting even better guests on the podcast. So I'll
100%.
appreciate that.
Do it,
Nice.
listeners. Thank you so much for hearing me out. I've really enjoyed the chat.
Thank you, Lex. Thanks for coming. See ya.
All right. See ya.